Welcome to 21st Sports, and today we're talking the Kansas City Chiefs at the Pittsburgh Steelers and their Sunday Night Football matchup played October 2nd, 2016. And going into this game, it looked like it was a possible, maybe a wild card preview between these two teams, as both these teams definitely have a chance at making the playoffs. Will they both make the playoffs? Well, that remains to be seen, but it turned into a blowout. And a lot of the offensive firepower, of course, the big numbers by Big Ben, but Le'Veon Bell, his return to the offense has brought balance to the force. With Le'Veon Bell in the backfield and with him running the ball the way he did, Big Ben was able to spread the rock around and put up some big numbers. Five touchdowns, and it's the fifth time that he's had a 5-touchdown game. And the defense of the Steelers also played phenomenal as well, as they're really getting to the quarterback and just shutting down the Kansas City Chiefs for the first 3 quarters. They shut them out. Of course, the Chiefs put up some points in the fourth, but the game was well out of reach at that point. The Steelers were already up 36-0. And also I want to just real quick apologize for the tardiness of this video. Got up kind of late. There's been construction going on outside where I record all week long, and I wasn't really, I didn't think you'd want to hear a jackhammer in the background, almost so loud. I don't know if you'd be able to hear me just na 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 boom 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 boom. Anyway, that's what I've been dealing with all week, but it was a really good game for sure. But let's break down how it all went down. It started off with Ben Roethlisberger hitting Darius Hayward-Bay for a 31-yard touchdown. And then they went for 2, and Roethlisberger hit Marcus Wheaton, and it was 8-0 Steelers over the Chiefs. Roethlisberger threw a second touchdown of the game to Antonio Brown for a 4-yard pass that made it 15-0 with the extra point by Boswell. Roethlisberger then connected with Antonio Brown for the second time in the first quarter. This one a 38-yard touchdown to make it 22-0. And so that was it for the first quarter, as Roethlisberger already had 3 touchdown passes. The second quarter was more quiet, not so much scoring until the final minute before intermission, when Roethlisberger threw his 4th touchdown. This one to Jesse James, a 9-yard touchdown pass, and it was 29-0 at the half. Then in the third quarter, Roethlisberger threw his 5th touchdown, a 30-yard pass to Marcus Wheaton, and that made it 36-0. So that was it for the third. Then in the fourth, the Chiefs finally got on the board. Alex Smith hit Tyreek Hill a 10-yard touchdown. That made it 36-7. So the Steelers are like, in case you're thinking the most incredible comeback ever, well, let's just put a couple more points on the board. And D'Angelo Williams, a 2-yard touchdown run, and that made it 43-7 about midway through the fourth. A game that was already well out of reach, and definitely, it just had all that was left to do was let the clock expire. But Alex Smith did throw another touchdown in the fourth. He hit Travis Kelce for a 3-yard touchdown with about 4 seconds left to play. And so the final score, 43-14, as the Steelers bounce back after that loss last week. Those, not something that was really going to be repeated. I felt last week that happened, but that they would bounce back with a much better performance. I didn't know it would be this big of a performance, but they definitely came to play, and they improved to 3-1. And with the performance like this against Kansas City, it definitely is a big statement to the rest of the AFC and the NFL that the Steelers, if you didn't already know, which you should have known already and not bought into the loss and the hype of that, but if you didn't know, the Steelers are a team to be reckoned with in 2016. They are definitely for real. And the Chiefs, this happens a few years back. Kansas City, they did this to New England a few years back, and then New England bounced back and they just ran the table after that big loss to Kansas City. A very similar game. I think that was on a Monday night, though, or it might have been a Sunday. But so, the Chiefs, can they do what New England did after the Chiefs did this to them a few years back? Well, we'll see if they can bounce back. they've got personnel, they got good coaching, and I think that they could make a run for the wild card. But it's gonna be tough in their division. Of course, the Broncos playing at the level they're playing, even with the troubles at quarterback with the injuries and the young quarterbacks, the Broncos still got that really good D. So I do think Kansas City has a chance at a wild card. It's a long shot at the division, but they could bounce back from this big loss. So the season's not over for them. But they're 500. That's after the first month being 500. It's not a bad place to be. Let's look at the numbers though for Roethlisberger. 22 for 27, 300 yards, 5 touchdowns. And then on the ground, Le'Veon Bell didn't get in the end zone, but he sure ran that rock. 18 carries for 144 yards in his return. Not to mention 5 receptions for 34 yards, giving him 178 total yards on the game. And the leading receiver was Sammy Coates. 6 receptions, 79 yards. Antonio Brown, 4 catches for 64 yards, 2 touchdowns. And of course, Hayward, Bay, Wheaton, and James had the other 3 touchdowns that were thrown by Roethlisberger. And then Alex Smith, 30 for 50. That's way too many passes for him to be attempting 50 passes. Are you kidding me? But that's what happens when you get in a deep hole like that, especially when you're down 22-0 after the first quarter. You gotta tend to lean on the pass a little bit. But yeah, he had 287 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and then Ware 13 carries for 82 yards. He also had 1 reception for 14 yards, giving him 96 total yards on the day. And Jeremy Maclin had 5 receptions for 78 yards. Of course, Hill and Kelsey had those fourth quarter touchdowns. But we look at the defense for the Steelers. Hayward with 3 sacks, putting that pressure on the quarterback. Williams had a sack as well. Jones with an interception, and Tuitt with 2 forced fumbles. And then on the other side for the Chiefs, Howard did have a sack and a half sack for Ford and Poe. So when we look at the first downs, the Chiefs actually had more first downs, 22 versus 18 for the Steelers. Thing was, the Steelers didn't really need first downs. A pretty high percentage, almost close to 20% of Roethlisberger's completions ended up in the end zone. He had 22 completions and 5 of those were touchdowns. So you didn't really need first downs when you're picking up that many yards. And not to mention, the 144 off 18 carries for Bell. So he's picking up big yards. And if you look at actually the average offensive play for the Steelers was almost 8 yards, 7.9. So it's a pretty good average, and they were averaging 5.7 yards per rushing play. So, and you actually look at the total net yards, 436 for Pittsburgh and 357 for Kansas City. And if you look at third downs, the Steelers were 6 for 11, 54%, and the Chiefs 8 for 17, 47%. So both teams were doing all right on third down. And then on fourth, the Chiefs 2 for 3. They were 66%. Of course, more of the third down conversions came later in the game for Kansas City. Not so much in the early goings. But we look at the penalties in this game. 9 penalties for the Steelers for 68 yards. 7 penalties against the Chiefs for 40 yards. The Chiefs had 3 fumbles, but they only lost 1. They recovered the other 2. The Steelers did have a fumble, but they recovered their own fumble. And then the red zone, Pittsburgh 3 for 3, 100%. And Kansas City was 2 for 3 in the red zone, 66%. But of course, both of those touchdowns came in the fourth when they were already down 36-0. And the time of possession, 30 minutes, 36 seconds for the Chiefs, 29 minutes, 24 seconds for the Steelers. But that offense of Pittsburgh, they don't need the ball for long. They score so quick, which that could end up being a problem. Not too much. You put points up, you're good. But if you score too quick, you might end up getting into a game where you have your defense on the field for too long, and then that gets them fatigued. But as long as you keep scoring, it doesn't really become a factor. But in this game, it was all Pittsburgh. They totally dominated. A big performance. And I don't know if they're going to quite be dominating teams to this extent. Although we could see a stretch where, we've seen in the past where Roethlisberger, when he starts to get on a tear and when he's got all his, weapons at his disposal, when he can spread that ball around to Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown and the rest of the receivers and the tight ends and that offense. I mean, he's got so much talent around him, some great players. Le'Veon Bell's might be the best back in the league. I don't want to jinx him, knock on wood, but I mean, the guy is just amazing. Not to mention, of course, Antonio Brown and even Hayward Bay and Coates. They're good. Wheaton's good. They've got a good team, so they can put up points. And Roethlisberger's shown where he's had stretches where he just puts up big numbers, lots of touchdowns, lots of yards, and then the complement of Bell on the ground. It's a tough offense to have to defend because they've got too many weapons and they pick up so many yards so quick. That's the thing too, is that even the yards after the catch and also with Bell just picking up big chunks of yards every time the ball's in his hands. They just move those chains, they move across the field, and they get down into scoring range and they'll put up those points, and they're tough to stop. In Kansas City's a good defense. They're not a bad defense, and this is what Pittsburgh did to them. So it's gonna be interesting to see moving forward, how defenses try to contain this offense of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Of course, a lot of that has to do with personnel and how you match up against them, and how you put yourself in a position for those matchups to favor you. It's tough to do against the Steelers. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Which plays and performances stuck out to you? Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and had a great week. And enjoy all the sports.